We begin this morning with your right to vote and potentially your data at risk, at least according to a lawsuit that's been filed. The U.S. Justice Department requesting state voter information from the State Election Commission. There's a temporary restraining order blocking that from happening right now. It's all linked to a lawsuit filed last month by a Calhoun County resident saying, I have privacy rights. I don't want my voter information shared with anyone. Well, the fate of that will be determined next week, or this coming week, a few days from now, at a hearing in Aiken County. That's where we begin on this Sunday in South Carolina as we get you connected to the Capitol. As usual, we have the usual suspects in here. Catherine Glenn Foster and Dave Wilson in here to talk about why the feds would even want South Carolinians' voter data, or from the more than 20 other states they're looking to get it from.
Right, there is no national voter database. Voting is handled at the state and local level. So you have the South Carolina Election Commission. They are responsible for handling all of the voter rolls that the different counties are also responsible for. So 3.3 million of you out there watching right now, if you are registered to vote, that information is kept in a database at the Election Commission. That data is state level data. Now, data can be bought and sold. Campaigns use it all the time to be able to identify and target the mail that you receive during the election season, making sure that your voter registration card is sent to you. But certain data is not included in the database that campaigns can access, including your driver's license number and your social security number. Now, it also shows your voter history, and it shows a lot of other information that you may or may not know is actually out there. But the big concern right now is you're giving over two credible pieces of information that can be used by someone else, namely your driver's license and the last 4 digits at least of your social security number.
And we can be clear about this. So the data we're talking about here is data that came from the government. It's our driver's license, our social security number. But when it gets spread out more broadly, then that can become a problem, because data is power, especially in this modern world that we live in. And when that data, when that power gets into the wrong hands, they can wreak havoc in our lives.
And that's what the woman from Calhoun County, who happens to be represented by the Senate Minority Leader, the Democrat out of Orangeburg County, Brad Hutto. And it really begins to make you wonder. I feel like there's this seesaw of politics going on. Had it been the Biden Justice Department who was requesting this information, I think there would be a lot of people on the Republican side who would be totally up in arms, and we would have a governor who would say absolutely not. But because it's the Trump Department of Justice, there seems to be more of a willingness to do so. So what you're finding out right now is there are 3 different laws. And Marcus, if you could pull that up real quick. There's 3 different laws at the national level that have affected what goes on here. The National Civil Rights Act of 1960 really set the groundwork for making sure that you have equal access to voting. The National Voter Registration Act did some levels of standardization and said, states, you're going to have to be responsible for maintaining voter data in a database, and it needs to be somewhat uniform. And then the Help America Vote Act of 2002 basically then put one more layer of security and understanding on top of that. So those laws right there are what the Justice Department is using, and says they have to have a basis and a purpose for requesting this information. But for some people, the basis and purpose for the request seem to be a little bit vague, and vague in law is never a good thing.
No,
it is
gray
not.
areas are not good.
Yeah, and you may remember as well, a few months ago, we heard about even this data going beyond the government, when we saw it going out into Elon Musk and what he was doing, and going beyond even the roles of government into perhaps the private sector. And so at that point, especially, this is not about power, or not about integrity. This is about power. This is about who is controlling our data, and it should be us. This is the government sharing our identity password.
You talked about a gray area in the law. We got about a minute left in this segment. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Parental leave law in this state came into question recently. An opinion issued by Attorney General Alan Wilson's office this past week clears it up a little bit. But at issue here was Representative Neil Collins brought to his attention, to the AG's attention, hey, there were 3 teachers denied parental leave after going through the tragedy of stillbirths. And Collins says, hey, they should get the same rights as everybody else. Wilson's office says, yes, they should. That's the opinion. So now they got to
Yes.
clear up the law in January, it sounds like.
That's exactly right. And the AG's office got it right. Birth is birth. Parents are parents, whether or not that baby is able to come home, that tragedy.
Yeah.
But parenting doesn't start when you deliver a live baby. As anyone who's been pregnant or known someone pregnant knows, there's a whole lead up to that of 9-10 months. And so acknowledging that was key, but they're right. We do need even more clarity in the law so that there's no question whatsoever that that period of grief is just as important, just as valuable as going home and taking care of a live child.
I think you'll see that one be a very quick move
Yeah.
through the House and the Senate, get over to the governor's desk. One of the very quick things that they do when the legislature does come back in January.
All right. Good stuff in that first segment. Coming up, we got a candidate for governor in the House, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. That's straight ahead.
The governor's race here in South Carolina is heating up with 5 declared Republicans. Joining us this Sunday morning is Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette, who's looking to move across the hall into the governor's office. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's really great to have you here. This has been a real great opportunity for you to start crisscrossing the state, to have conversations with folks and to hear what people are saying. What are you hearing out there on the campaign trail?
Well, you know, this goes long before the campaign trail. So as my role as lieutenant governor, unlike all the other lieutenant governors, I work hand in hand with the governor. So I've been crisscrossing the state now for 7 years, listening to people, talking to businesses, and hearing what's going on. But, you know, it's the same as it's always been. People care about what's going on at their kitchen table. They care about what's going on in their businesses, and that's what they want to hear about. How are we going to make their lives better? How are we going to put more money back in their pockets? And how are we going to keep South Carolina safe and prospering?
And in fact, you have built your campaign on your business background, starting way back when, founding Quality Business Solutions. Absolutely. How has that experience informed how you've been lieutenant governor, and how would it inform how you would govern the state?
So, you know, the governor picked me. It was the first time a governor got to pick his lieutenant governor. And the governor wanted somebody that was coming from the business world, who had a fresh set of eyes, who could sit down with business and understand what they were talking about, that could understand exactly the pain that they felt every day trying to make money and, you know, get a bottom line. And so that's how I've really attacked my role as lieutenant governor. Is how do we make South Carolina even better for our businesses? Kind of like President Trump did, right? He took his business acumen, he took his fresh set of eyes, he took it to Washington. And that has been, I think, a huge advantage, because I'm not tied to anything. I'm not tied to any piece of legislation. And I think it's been wonderful to hear what businesses want to see.
And like President Trump, you really are the quintessential political outsider, right? You didn't have political experience before 7 years ago when you ran for lieutenant governor.
It's funny,
right?
I make a joke all the time. I said I wasn't even my high school class president, right? But what I did have was a passion to really help small businesses grow. And in my role in the private sector, I could see that it was getting harder and harder. The American dream was getting further and further away from my children, from your children, right? Than it was for my grandparents who came here as immigrants. So that's what really gave me like the passion. I say it all the time, and I've said it for long before I was lieutenant governor. President Trump should have been a huge inspiration for business people who said, okay, I've done this on the private sector, now how do we make our mark in the public sector to create an environment where businesses can grow and people can thrive? And if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, how do you send that flying? And so
with 5 declared candidates right now in this race, how do you go through, we talk about this, we've talked about this plenty of times on the air, how do you distinguish yourself from every other Republican candidate that's out there, when a lot of the times you're touting many of the same messages: lower taxes, more freedoms, better business environment? So what is it that distinguishes Pamela Evette from everybody else in the race for right now?
Well, that's a great question. And I like to say I think the choice is clear and it's very obvious, right? I'm a conservative businesswoman. I'm a mother of 3. I'm a woman of faith. I stood with President Trump long before there were ever polling records. I mean, I was in the private sector, so I had no reason politically to support and stand with the president. And when the president came here January of 23, out of all those candidates, I was the only one standing with him. I was the only one that said, hey, there are no polling records. There were talks of him getting indicted. There were all these things. And trust me, there were a lot of people that said, are you crazy? And I said, no, I'm just loyal. And I believe that he is the man for the job, and I'm going to stand with him till the end. And I've sat in the executive branch. I have the resume that actually ties into this job, right? I've been successful in the private sector, and I think we have done a great job, the governor and I, delivering a great legacy. So you can pick from somebody that has those traits, or you can pick, as you so eloquently put it, from a career politician who lots of times makes promises that they can never keep, and that's where voters get frustrated.
Right. Let's talk then about what is it that distinguishes Pamela Evette from the McMaster-Evette administration. What is it where's the light in the distance between you and the governor on issues? Is there any difference, or is this really a continuation of what he's been doing for going on 10 years now?
Well, I'm very proud of the legacy we have, right? We've had the largest tax cut in state's history. We've given the largest pay raise to law enforcement. We've kept biological males out of women's sports. We've passed constitutional carry. We've grown the state effectively. So I think where you're going to see now is different challenges for the state. I have talked about how do we make government run more efficiently, right? And I think President Trump has done a great job talking about what he calls DOGE. I think we should personalize it a little bit here in South Carolina, and let's call it SCOGE. And let's really look at how we go into, and being the governor, when I'm governor, I have a lot of cabinet positions that we can go into and say, okay, listen, we're going to cut waste, we're going to leverage technology, we're going to leverage AI, and we're going to actually make an increase to the bottom line. So a lot of those business principles that I use to grow my company, because a lot of people don't realize, I didn't inherit my company from my family. I started it from a room in my home. I turned it into a national company. And when I left to become lieutenant governor, our revenues were $1.5 billion. And so I understand what it's like to sign the front of a paycheck. I understand what it's like to balance a budget. And so if you're looking for a governor who can look at a $15+ billion general fund and figure out the best way to mark that money, I've done that. And I've created good paying jobs, and I know how to move the needle. And I think that's what I'll be bringing to my role as governor.
And that really speaks to me about how you know how to be responsible for people. You know how to be responsible for your employees, to lead South Carolinians. Now, you often portray yourself as a fighter, ready from day one, and it would be just a little bit of a move across the hall, pack up a few boxes. But what would be your first action, your first executive order, your first bill you would hope to sign?
So, what I want to see happen is, like I said, I want to see all of our agencies start moving towards efficiency. And that is key. Every single one of the candidates, like you said, Dave, very eloquent. We all want to get to eliminate state income tax. But to do that, you got to make sure that you're cutting things, right? You got to cut some spending. And again, I keep going back to efficiency because it's the key. When I was in business and we were having great years, I never sat on my laurels and said, "Wow, we're not going to change anything, right? We're just gonna stay like it is." No, we invested more money in technology. We were more efficient. People were happier, and business grew, and so did our bottom line. And so that'll be the first things I look at when I'm governor.
Pamela Evette, Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina. Thanks so much for joining us this Sunday morning. We're going to have an extended Connect to the Capitol extra with the Lieutenant Governor to talk a little bit more in depth and have a longer conversation. Make sure you catch that at WACH.com. Coming up next, Brian is joined by the Attorney General, yet another candidate for the governor's office, talking about some bathroom bills and the things that are going on right now in infrastructure around safety in South Carolina.
Welcome back to Connect to the Capitol. As promised, Attorney General Alan Wilson in studio, who's making what seems like about every 3-week stop here at the studio for Connect to the Capitol, and we're glad to have you as always.
I need one of those frequent flyer cards.
You do, you do.
So I get like a free burger or something every month.
I don't even get them, so I don't know if I can give them to you. But we can look into that. We can definitely, but you are a frequent flyer for sure. Couple things we want to talk to you about, but first out of the gate, last week you were involved with an action, also with the Superintendent of Education, Ellen Weaver, involving a case out of Berkeley County. And it's looking to maybe I wouldn't say clarify, but it has to do with South Carolina's bathroom privacy law. A child there who identifies as male looking to have access to the boys' bathroom. But this is exception made for one student, and that's where you take issue with.
Absolutely, and I appreciate Superintendent Ellen Weaver, who's also a party to this lawsuit, who's also supporting it. Basically what happened, South Carolina passed a law that basically puts strings on money that local schools get, and as a condition of accepting that public funding, that you cannot allow biological males in the female spaces or biological females in the male spaces, like showers, locker rooms, bathrooms, etc. There was one child, a transgender child, as you identified, who brought a suit against this law. We won at this district court level. It is now at the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals out of Richmond. And basically, this student and another group are trying to sue the state of South Carolina to allow this student to go into the boys' bathroom. This is a female, a biological female. The Fourth Circuit has temporarily allowed this student to go into the bathroom that they identify with the sex that they identify with, and it only applies to this one student in this one school, nowhere else. We are going to the Supreme Court to ask the Supreme Court to stay or stop that injunction, meaning allow the law to remain in effect, meaning boys in boys spaces, girls in girls spaces, until the Supreme Court can rule on this. We haven't even gotten the Fourth Circuit to rule on it yet. We're still arguing the merits of this. It could be months before we get this argument heard. This is just a temporary rule where the Fourth Circuit's allowing this one student to go into the bathrooms that they identify with.
Mm-hmm. We're into the school year now.
Yeah.
So as of now, is that student being allowed to go as it sits now?
Yeah, that is what is going to be happening with this student. We're trying to stop that because it's not about that one student. We believe that the school can accommodate that individual child. There are gender-neutral bathrooms, there are teacher bathrooms, there are bathrooms that child can go into. But what you're talking about is the 0.01% is controlling the 99.9%. And when 99.9% of the population wants to be in a bathroom and be in a space like that where privacy is a major issue, and in some cases safety. And it's not just about protecting the 99.9%, it's also protecting the female who's willing to go into a boy's bathroom. So again, it's about protecting everyone. There's a way to accommodate that student to not be cruel, but while protecting the rights, the privacy rights of all the other students, and that's what we're asking the court to do.
Mm-hmm. You're running for governor, it's no secret,
yeah.
That's for sure. Does an issue like this, you think, come up more and more on the campaign trail as we start to really ramp things up? We know that transgender issues, sexual identity issues have become part of the political conversation. Do you expect things like this to drive debate?
Well, I mean, look, these issues are going to happen whether I'm running for governor or not. I mean, this issue didn't pop up because I'm running for governor. I just happened to be running for governor. A lot of these laws were passed a year or 2 years ago. I mean, obviously the Scarametti case at the Supreme Court, similar to a case here in South Carolina that barred prohibited states from allowing students to, or prohibited minors rather, from being transitioned prematurely before they were 18 years old. That got upheld at the Supreme Court. We had a similar case here. These issues involving transgender and other social issues, they are happening all over the country. They've been happening for years. They're going to continue to happen while I'm Attorney General. They're going to happen after I leave the Attorney General's office. My job is to protect and defend the rule of law and represent the state of South Carolina to the best that I possibly can. And I'm going to do that regardless of whether I'm a candidate for governor or not.
Absolutely. One question I want to ask you, because we're giving everybody the opportunity, excuse me, to take on this issue. More and more around the state, we're seeing cities, towns, counties pass individual hate crime ordinances because the state, as you know, does not have one of two that does not have a statewide hate crime law, Wyoming being the other. If you're elected, would you sign a law into effect if the General Assembly puts one in front of you?
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
I've spoken, the first thing you do before you make a decision to endorse or get behind any law is you want to read the actual law. And there have been several variations of this law that I've seen. I've spoken with solicitors and prosecutors all over the state. I've spoken with law enforcement officials all over the state. Obviously, I have my opinions on it. I've spoken with members of my staff. My position is this: as long as you're not creating additional burdens for law enforcement or prosecutors to get over the hurdle, by baking in an additional element of hate. In other words, if there was an assault and battery with intent to kill, and then there was an additional 5 years you could tack on if you proved an additional element, and I'm not saying that's what the law says. Something like that I would be okay with. It's an enhancement for attacking someone because they're part of a protected class. Then that is something I would be okay with, but as long as you're not making it a requirement to get convictions, and obviously you want to manage people's expectations, because just because there's an element of race or sexuality or something involved in a crime does not mean that that was the motivation behind the crime. So you don't want to raise expectations, but signing a law into effect that doesn't create additional burdens to law enforcement and prosecutors, I would be open to.
Yeah. The ones, there's so many voices that do support this, and I've known you for 20 years. I know you're more than an AG, you're more than a candidate for governor, you're a human being.
Yeah.
And I know you hear that the calls from folks who say, we just want the State House to pass something so we know that they're listening, that they care about us.
Yeah.
And I know you hear that.
Yeah. Well, what you don't want is you don't want people to pass something that virtue signals, but the thing that they pass is actually a bad law with unintended consequences. You want to take a measure twice, cut once approach. And sometimes I think people are in a rush to get something passed just so that they can feel like we care, but the thing that we passed is actually harmful or hurtful and creates issues down the road. But at the same time, you don't want paralysis by analysis. Sometimes these things take way too long. But again, I think there's a way to balance that and to deliver real good laws for the people of South Carolina that don't have bad unintended consequences.
All right. Alan Wilson, thank you so much for giving us a little time. We'll see you again in about 3 weeks.
See you then.
And I'll see if we can get that burger on the grill for you.
Yeah, or a free drink, a free Coke or
Anything.
something. Anything.
All right. Thank you, as always. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Alan Wilson here on Connect to the Capitol. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connect to the Capitol. We're talking about South Carolina's ports, a significant economic driver in this state. But the Ports Authority is in flux right now. We had a recent resignation, I guess we could say, and a meeting this past week where it sounds like not much was accomplished in terms of addressing some issues there in the Ports Authority and the port system overall, where production is down. That's not good. We're supposed to have an advantage over other ports. That was the basis of deepening the harbor.
Exactly. The harbor was deepened. We have the ability to have a ship going in and a ship coming out at the same time, that dual channel. And yet we were seeing Savannah, their market increasing, our market in Charleston decreasing. And the question was, why?
And that's the place where there has been pressure that was put on the leadership there to see changes take place. But when you see a significant drop in the amount of cargo that comes in and out of a port, you have to understand that is a huge impact on revenue for the state, the commercial work that's being done. South Carolina's port is an artery for business across the Southeast. And the state spent well over $300 million deepening the harbor there in Charleston by 3 feet. So these huge post-Panamax ships could come in and out, as Catherine was just saying. And that's the place where there should be an advantage for that port over the one-way traffic of the Savannah River. I mean, imagine a river versus a harbor. And this is where leadership questions have come into play here.
And at this point, companies are watching. Companies like BMW, which ships such a huge percentage of its cars overseas. The global markets are watching, and our neighboring ports are watching.
Of course they are. So something needs to be done quickly, get some permanent leadership in place there. Right. One last thing before we get out of here. We're going to have an extended conversation about this on a Connect to the Capitol Extra on our website, WACH.com. But R.J. May, we know his story, the 10 federal child porn charges he faces. Hearing this past week, he will defend himself against these charges when that trial kicks off in about a month. That's significant. Quickly, why would that even be the case from the legal perspective?
Yeah, so essentially, it isn't exactly what he wanted. He was granted public defenders, well-known, very experienced public defenders, and but he had some issues with them. He had some disagreements with them about some evidence and whether that should be admitted. So they were not able to resolve that, came to an impasse. He asked for a hybrid model where the lawyers would be able to sit next to him at counsel table, but he would represent himself. Judge said, no, you can't do that hybrid. That creates that gray area.
Yeah.
But what you can do is represent yourself pro se and have those other lawyers behind you so that you can consult them on points of law. With that said, it is never a good idea to go in court without a lawyer. Ever, no matter what kind of lawyer you are, how experienced you are, even if your specialty is that particular area, never a good plan.
Well, we're gonna have a lot. You're gonna have a lot more to say to that in the extra that we're gonna have for you online at wach.com. We got to wrap it up here, though. In this version of Connect to the Capitol, we will see you again in a week.
Have a great Sunday.